Welcome to Protecting the Planet. I'm Ben Tracy. In this episode, we bring you stories of how climate change and pollution are impacting the animals that share our planet. From those now thriving through conservation efforts to species facing endangerment and even extinction. We'll take you to Florida, where manatees are starving to death because the seagrass that they eat is dying. And to California, where researchers are measuring how much plastic whales ingest every day. But we begin with the unusual deep-sea creatures who may be vital to helping combat climate change through the food they eat. As the sun rises along the California coast, we head out into Monterey Bay with researchers from the area's world-famous aquarium. What are you guys doing out here today? What is the mission?
So we are looking for deep-sea animals that are really far from the surface, but also really far from the bottom.
Tommy Knowles is the senior aquarist. We watched as the team deployed this underwater robot to search for elusive creatures in what's known as the midwater of the deep sea. Compared to some of the marine creatures we're all familiar with, the sharks, the dolphins, those sorts of things, how do these compare?
So the animals that we're looking for in the midwater are a little bit more of the squishy, weirder looking animals.
They are simply otherworldly, floating in the dark in what's known as the oxygen minimum zone, about 3,000 feet below the surface. The robot travels through so-called marine snow, mainly fish scales, whale poop, and a lot of microplastics from humans. In these depths, the researchers have found this vampire squid, rare brightly colored jellyfish, and also this, a barrel-eye fish with a transparent domed head, revealing upward-facing eyes. It's been seen by humans less than 10 times. It looks like outer space down there, and a lot of these things look like aliens.
Right, well, to be honest, they are the Earthlings and we're the aliens that are coming down with our bright lights to look in on them.
That is amazing looking, that red color. They led us into the ship's control room where they remotely operate the underwater robot. It is really cool looking.
Yeah, it's stunning.
Just then they found this, a jellyfish so rare it doesn't even have a name. For now, they just call it Red X.
And so now we wait for it to show up in collection tube number 1.
They extend the robot's arm and using suction capture the creature in this container.
Yeah, today we've had a few good hits, so hopefully that continues.
It did. They also collected this red paper lantern jellyfish and another with a name that would make Dr. Seuss jealous, the bloody belly comb jelly.
And he's in there. Nice work.
With the rover back on deck, the team rushes to transport their finds into larger jars inside this makeshift lab. That is so cool.
And it comes with it.
Wow. These underwater discoveries are now the stars of a new exhibit at the Monterey Bay Aquarium called Into the Deep. It took nearly 5 years to design and build this elaborate life support system of pipes, pumps, and filters to replicate the deep sea environment.
This exhibition is the first one in the United States, and we think the world of this magnitude.
Beth Redmond Jones is in charge of the aquarium's exhibits.
This is an opportunity for visitors to see animals that no one has ever seen before.
But the science behind this display is about much more than that.
We should really call our planet ocean, not Earth, because 2/3 of the planet's covered by water.
Kelly Benoit Bird is the senior scientist at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, or MBARI. How crucial is the ocean when it comes to this mitigation of climate change?
Yeah, the ocean has taken up more than 90% of the heat produced by global warming, and every year it sequesters about 25% of the carbon dioxide that we emit into the atmosphere from the burning of fossil fuels. So the ocean provides critical life support.
Scientists are now studying the role deep-sea creatures play as millions of them rise from the depths at night to feed in the cover of darkness.
This is the largest migration on the planet. And every night at sunset, they come up to the surface and then they migrate back down again at sunrise. If you were to make that move, it'd be the equivalent of a 10K to get your breakfast and then another 10K before you went to bed.
I'm far too lazy for that.
Me too.
But what they're doing is no joke. By feeding on plants and marine animals near the surface, scientists now think they might be responsible for sequestering up to half of the carbon dioxide absorbed by the ocean.
And that provides a sort of biological conveyor belt. Only when the carbon dioxide that's taken up by plant life gets into the deep sea does it stay there and stay out of the atmosphere.
Of course, that comes with a cost. Our oceans are becoming more acidic and rapidly warming. That's making storms stronger and more deadly, and could also impact the ocean life now working overtime to protect our planet.
So we're trying to understand exactly how much of a role this migration plays and what affects it.
But we already know enough to be thankful to these amazing creatures that dwell in the deep. Coming up, how one hotel in Kenya is sticking their necks out for critically endangered giraffes. We head now to Africa, where giraffes are dying at an alarming rate, threatened by poachers and drought. But at Kenya's Giraffe Manor, tourists are helping to protect them, one social media photo at a time. We want to note this story contains graphic images of deceased animals that could be disturbing for some viewers. Here's Deborah Pata.
The gentle giants of the African savanna, so iconic, no wildlife safari is complete without them. At Giraffe Manor, eco-tourists pay for the chance to get up close and personal.
Got it. Such a surreal experience. A giraffe sticking its head through a window, waking up to that.
But it's not just for the thrills, it is critical for conservation.
She's a bit greedy then.
Conservationist Cecilia Mweni says people have no idea giraffes are fighting for their survival. So seldom spoken about, it's known as the silent extinction.
So the giraffe is basically under threat from all corners, from people themselves, from predators, from climate change.
Poachers hunt them for bushmeat and even their tails, believing it gives them power. Humans have also encroached on giraffe habitat, and exacerbating this, the Horn of Africa's worst drought in 40 years, captured in these horrific images. Numbers of the Nubian giraffe have dwindled to such an extent they're on the critically endangered list, explains Giraffe Manor's Mikey Karhatli.
Each one is different. You know, in many countries throughout Africa, they've actually disappeared.
Paying for this rare privilege funds conservation.
Look who has come for breakfast.
And supports a breeding program run jointly with the Kenyan government. Most of the giraffe born here have been reintroduced into the wild. It's so successful, numbers have risen from just 76 to 1,200. Not just a once-in-a-lifetime experience, it saves lives as well.
Moving now from the African savanna to the deep blue sea. Washing synthetic clothes can contribute to plastic pollution when those synthetic fibers go down the drain with the rinse cycle and ultimately into the ocean. Researchers are studying the impact of this plastic pollution on whales. KPIX correspondent John Ramos explains.
It is those tiny specks, barely visible to the human eye, that concerns Matt Savoca, an ocean pollution researcher at Stanford's Hopkins Marine Station in Pacific Grove. He was part of the study to find out how much of the fibers are getting into the whales.
But the thing that surprised me is that there was no information out there from living animals, from living whales, as to how much water they filter or how much prey they eat. And both of those things are absolutely critical to get at this question of how much plastic the whales are eating.
So a group of researchers began following the large blue and humpback whales in Monterey Bay. They use drones and high-tech sensors to track the animals' movements and eating patterns. And they are truly world-class eaters.
These whales eat hundreds of millions of tons, literally, of food in the ocean. That's more than our entire global marine fisheries catch for all the seafood that we eat. The blue whales ate more than all that.
The study found that blue whales are consuming as much as 95 pounds of plastic each day, perhaps 1 billion pieces in the course of one feeding season. but much of that is coming from the whale's main food supply, the tiny sea creatures that are themselves ingesting plastics on a microscopic level. Dr. Ari Friedlander says he was stunned by the contrast in scales.
That step is really what is surprising, is that the smallest animals, these zooplankton and krill, these things that are eating very, very small particles, are getting enough in them that can magnify in baleen whales to get these extraordinary numbers. It's really amazing.
But all of this is so new that no one really knows how it's affecting the whales, if at all. So far, the whale population worldwide is doing pretty well. But whether they will pay a future price for man's obsession with plastic is a question that has yet to be answered.
I think if you have an animal like a whale, like a really charismatic animal that is ingesting a lot of this pollution, possibly could be affected by it, we don't know exactly how or to what degree, that might galvanize people to say, you know what, we care about this and we're going to do something about it.
Up next, scientists racing to save Florida's coral reefs. The world's third largest coral reef spans more than 350 miles, largely along the Florida Keys. Rising ocean temperatures and disease threaten corals, which are actually animals. Scientists are now creating a genetic Noah's Ark of corals in an effort to save many species. Manuel Bojorquez has more.
Just off the Florida Keys lies the world's third largest coral reef, once a vibrant habitat for millions of plants and animals. But an outbreak of stony coral tissue loss disease threatens to decimate 20 of the 45 species found here, including larger reef-building corals.
This disease that's burning through the Florida Keys is an incredible event that's happening, and it's like a wildfire.
Dr. Andrew Stamper says that endangers Florida's fishing industry and our food supply too.
Unfortunately, we do not know exactly what is causing this.
In order to save the reef, scientists have moved some species hundreds of miles away to labs like this one in Orlando, a coral Noah's Ark.
This essentially is a gene bank, so we're trying to protect the genetics of these corals so that their offspring can ultimately be returned back to the Florida reef tract.
Jim Kinsler is part of a team of private and public partners operating the Florida Coral Rescue Center.
This is a rescue in a real sense.
It's truly a rescue, and this is truly the first time many of us have been involved in rescuing an entire ecosystem.
Inside the lab, the work to simulate breeding conditions is both delicate and painstaking. LED lights replicate the sun and moon cycles. Volunteers feed the coral in water treated to mimic their real habitat. Just as delicate is the task of relocating the lab-grown coral to sea.
Will this really have an impact out there in the real world?
I think it will.
Andrew Walker is president of the Fish and Wildlife Foundation of Florida.
We think the real challenge is just growing them out to a size that we can test them in those waters, test their disease resistance, and then propagate the successful corals by the hundreds of thousands, literally.
A new generation of coral, they hope, for generations to come.
We stay in Florida for our final story as we take a closer look at manatees. Sometimes called sea cows, their numbers are dwindling as the seagrass they eat disappears, due in part to humans' impact on the waterways where they live. At least 120 manatees have already died this year, and 800 deaths were confirmed in 2022. It's estimated fewer than 6,000 remain in the wild. I met up with the passionate folks trying to save them.
The manatees, they really are everywhere. They're all around us.
The manatees are literally everywhere this morning.
It's a flotilla of Florida manatees just hanging out in the morning mist.
There's like 6 or 7 right in there.
Yeah, they're literally like stacked on top of each other here.
It's a manatee traffic jam.
It is a manatee traffic jam.
Cora Burcham works for the nonprofit Save the Manatee. Nearly every morning here at Florida's Blue Spring State Park, she hand counts the manatees that flock here in the winter for the warm water.
We've had days in here where we've had over 600 manatees.
Wow.
Oh, that's Harry. That was Harry.
Harry?
Harry the manatee.
She knows most by name because of their distinctive scars from being hit by boat propellers.
They're like family, you know, they're like family coming back.
Bertram is now worried that many of them may not survive. Manatees have been starving to death, their bones even washing up on shore, while zoos and places such as SeaWorld rush to rescue the emaciated marine mammals.
Having lost hundreds of manatees to starvation, that's never happened before.
Patrick Rose is executive director of Save the Manatee and says starvation is the leading cause of a drastic spike in manatee deaths.
Many of those manatees that did finally succumb to the starvation, their organs were really deteriorated. It was just really an agonizing death.
More than half of the manatees have died here inside the Indian River Lagoon, which stretches for more than 150 miles along Florida's east coast. And the reason they're starving is because their food is disappearing. Manatees are vegetarians and often called sea cows because they eat a lot of seagrass, more than 100 pounds a day. But for about a decade now, the seagrass has been disappearing. That's because of human-caused water pollution from Florida's development boom, mainly sewage from septic systems and fertilizer runoff from nearby farms. That helped fuel a recent series of algae superblooms in Florida. They darken the water and block out the sun, killing the seagrass. The manatees are left struggling to find food.
We think we're right at the tipping point.
Dennis Hanasak is a researcher at the Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute, where they're experimenting with growing seagrass in these large tanks and then transplanting it into the lagoon to try to restore some of the lost seagrass beds.
How much seagrass has been lost?
60 to 80% if you look maybe at the whole lagoon.
By some estimates, repairing the massive lagoon will require $5 billion and much tougher pollution rules. So for now, desperate animal welfare organizations have even resorted to hand-feeding manatees romaine lettuce. This manatee, Anastasia, had lost much of her body weight, but in October she was strong enough to be released. Bertram says it's humans that cause this problem, and we need to fix it.
It's not going to be a quick fix. I strongly believe if we all work together and we all do our part, we can still make a difference.
For more stories like these and live coverage of breaking news 24/7, stream us right here on CBS News, available across all platforms. Thanks for watching Protecting the Planet. I'm Ben Tracy.